The twin suns of Theta 7 burned overhead as Captain Marcus Reed led his team through the crystalline desert. The planet's surface sparkled like broken glass under the harsh light, and every step sent razor-sharp sand grinding against their boots. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his scanner again. The Corthony sensor array was just ahead, hidden among the towering crystal formations that jutted from the desert floor like frozen lightning. Behind him, Sergeant Lisa Park adjusted her rifle strap and scanned the horizon. Her dark eyes never stopped moving, always watching for threats. Corporal Tom Bradley carried the heavy demolition pack that would destroy their target, his broad shoulders straining against the weight. Private Alex Rivera brought up the rear, young and eager, but experienced enough to know when something felt wrong. "Something's not right," Park whispered into her unit. "This is too easy." Marcus nodded but kept moving forward. The mission briefing had been simple: locate and destroy the Corthony sensor array that was jamming human supply lines in this sector. Intelligence said the site was lightly defended, maybe a few technicians and basic automated defenses. But Park was right. In 3 years of fighting the Corthony Empire, nothing had ever been easy. The crystal formations grew taller and more twisted as they approached the target zone. Some towers reached 50 meters into the sky, their surfaces reflecting and refracting the sunlight into rainbow patterns that could blind a person if they looked too long. The sand between them was deeper here, sometimes reaching their knees. It made walking difficult and left clear tracks behind them. Bradley stumbled and caught himself against a crystal spire. The surface was smooth as mirror and cold despite the heat. "How much further?" he asked, breathing hard. Marcus checked his scanner one more time. 200 meters, he said. "The array should be right around that bend." They moved forward cautiously, weapons ready. The silence was complete, except for the soft whisper of sand against crystal and their own breathing. No wind stirred the desert, no insects buzzed. Even for a dead world like Theta 7, it was too quiet. Rivera was the first to see the trap. "Captain," he said urgently, pointing ahead. "Look at the sand patterns." Marcus raised his binoculars and studied the area around the bend. At first everything looked normal, but then he saw what Rivera had noticed. The sand was too smooth in some places, too rough in others. There were no natural wind patterns. Someone had disturbed it recently and tried to cover their tracks. "It's a trap," Park said flatly. "They're waiting for us." Before Marcus could respond, the crystal formations around them exploded with enemy fire. Energy bolts streaked through the air, their blue-white light leaving afterimages on his retinas. The Corthony had been hiding in camouflage positions among the crystals, their insectoid forms nearly invisible against the reflective surfaces. "Take cover," Marcus shouted, diving behind a low crystal ridge. His team scattered, looking for protection among the formations. But the Corthony had chosen their ambush site well. Every piece of cover was within their overlapping fields of fire. The aliens themselves were nightmarish to see in battle. Each Corthony stood nearly 3 meters tall, with chitinous armor that gleamed like black metal. They had 4 arms, the upper pair holding energy weapons, while the lower pair manipulated equipment or provided stability. Their heads were elongated and insectoid, with compound eyes that could track multiple targets at once. When they moved, they did so with mechanical precision, like living war machines. Bradley tried to reach a better position, but caught a plasma bolt in the shoulder. The energy weapon burned through his armor like it was paper, and he screamed. As superheated metal fused with his flesh, he stumbled backward, dropping the demolition pack, and a second shot took him in the chest. His body armor couldn't stop the concentrated energy, and he fell face first into the crystal sand. "Bradley!" Rivera shouted, rising from cover to help his friend. 3 energy bolts converged on his position simultaneously. His body was thrown backward against a crystal spire, which shattered from the impact. When the rainbow fragments settled, Rivera wasn't moving. Park tried to provide covering fire with her rifle, but the Corthony weapons outranged and outpowered anything the humans carried. She managed to hit one alien in the lower torso, but its armor absorbed most of the impact. The creature barely stumbled before returning fire. Park rolled sideways, trying to find new cover, but there was nowhere to go. A plasma bolt caught her in the leg, spinning her around, and the second shot ended her fight. Marcus found himself alone, surrounded by superior numbers and firepower. His rifle was nearly useless against their armor at this range. He could see at least 8 Corthony moving through the crystal formations, closing in on his position. Their movements were coordinated and professional. They had done this before. He tried to reach the emergency beacon on his belt, but energy bolts forced him back into cover. Crystal fragments rained down around him as the aliens concentrated their fire on his hiding spot. The formations were tough, but they wouldn't hold forever under that kind of punishment. A voice spoke in heavily accented standard, the common language of human space. "Human creature, you are surrounded. Your companions are dead. Surrender, and your death will be quick." Marcus looked around desperately. His team was gone. His weapons were inadequate. His cover was disintegrating under enemy fire, but he wasn't ready to give up. He pulled a grenade from his belt and armed it. If he was going to die, he would take some of them with him. "Come and get me," he shouted back, the Corthony commander. Distinguished by ornate markings on his carapace, chittered something in his own language. The other aliens laughed, a sound like breaking glass. They began to advance, taking their time. Enjoying the hunt, Marcus waited until they were close enough, then threw the grenade and charged. The explosion knocked 2 Corthony down and damaged a third, but there were too many others. Energy bolts struck him from multiple directions. His armor failed, and pain exploded through his body as the weapons burned through flesh and bone. He fell among the crystal formations, his blood seeping into the silicon sand. The Corthony commander approached, kicking sand over his wounds with one clawed foot. "Soft meat," the alien said, looking down at him. "Weak prey. Your species should have stayed in their own space." As darkness closed in, Marcus heard them discussing their next target, the human colony of New Haven, just 2 days away. They believed they had eliminated the only witnesses to their buildup. They were wrong. 26 hours later, Marcus opened his eyes to agony. Every nerve in his body screamed at once. Plasma burns covered his torso and arms where the Corthony energy weapons had punched through his armor. Deep cuts from crystal fragments crisscrossed. His skin, his left leg, was bent at an angle that meant broken bones. Blood had dried in thick layers across his uniform, mixing with the silicon sand to form a rough crust. He tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through his chest like lightning. Something was definitely broken inside, probably ribs, maybe worse. His breathing was shallow and wet, which meant internal bleeding. By all medical logic, he should be dead. But he wasn't, and that meant he still had work to do. The Corthony had stripped his team's bodies of useful equipment, but they had been careless. Marcus's personal medical kit was still clipped to his belt, partially hidden under his torn armor. With trembling fingers, he opened it and took inventory. 3 painkiller injections, 2 combat stimulants, basic bandages, a small cauterizing tool, and a tube of synthetic skin. Not much, but it would have to be enough. First, he needed to stop the bleeding. The worst wounds were on his torso, where plasma bolts had burned completely through his body armor. The edges of the holes were charred black, which was actually good news because it meant the wounds were partially cauterized already. He activated the small medical torch and began the agonizing process of sealing the worst injuries. The pain was indescribable. Marcus bit down on a piece of his damaged armor to muffle his screams. Each touch of the cauterizing tool felt like being shot all over again. Sweat poured down his face, mixing with blood and sand. Twice he passed out from the pain, only to wake up and continue the work. When the major bleeding was stopped, he injected himself with one of the combat stimulants. The drug hit his system like liquid fire, flooding his body with artificial energy and numbing some of the pain. It would also speed up his heart rate and metabolism, which meant he would burn through his remaining strength faster. But without it, he would never make it off this battlefield. Marcus struggled to his feet, using a crystal formation for support. His left leg couldn't bear much weight, so he fashioned a crude crutch from a piece of his rifle stock. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain through his body, but he forced himself to keep going. New Haven was 3 days away by vehicle, but he was on foot and badly injured. He had maybe 40 hours before the Courtney reached the colony. The twin suns had moved across the sky while he was unconscious. It was now mid-afternoon, which meant the desert temperature was approaching its daily peak. His water supply was limited to what remained in his personal bottle and what he could salvage from his dead teammates. That gave him maybe 2 days of water if he was careful. In this heat, that might not be enough. He began walking one painful step at a time. The crystal sand shifted under his makeshift crutch, making every step uncertain. The formations around him reflected and magnified the heat until the air shimmered like liquid. Within an hour, his improvised bandages were soaked with sweat and fresh blood, but Marcus had advantages the Courtney didn't know about. He was a human being, and humans were very good at refusing to die. Every step forward was an act of defiance against the aliens who had left him for dead. Every breath was proof that they had underestimated their enemy. The pain became fuel for his anger, and anger became fuel for his determination. As evening approached, the temperature began to drop rapidly. Desert worlds like Theta 7 had no atmosphere to retain heat, so nighttime brought freezing cold as deadly as the daytime heat. Marcus wrapped himself in salvaged gear and kept moving. Stopping meant freezing to death, and he had too much work to do for that. During the night, he encountered his first Courtney patrol. 3 aliens moving through the crystal formations in single file, probably checking on their sensor posts. Marcus watched them from concealment, studying their movements and equipment. They were overconfident, chattering to each other in their clicking language, not bothering with proper security protocols. Marcus had lost his rifle, but he still had 2 grenades and a combat knife. More importantly, he had human creativity and desperation. He waited until the patrol passed his hiding spot, then followed them. When they stopped to examine one of their sensor devices, he struck. The first grenade took out the lead Courtney completely. The second alien spun around, raising its weapon, but Marcus was already moving. The combat knife found the gap between its armor plates, driven by muscles powered by stimulants and rage. The third alien got off one wild shot before Marcus's second grenade finished the job. The fight left him weaker, but more determined. He took their water supplies and a small energy weapon that he could barely lift. More importantly, he had disrupted their patrol schedule. When these 3 failed to report in, the Courtney would know something was wrong. Dawn brought new challenges. The stimulant was wearing off, leaving him shaky and exhausted. His improvised medical work was failing as his body's natural healing processes struggled against the severity of his injuries. He needed another injection, but that would leave him with only 1 left. He had to make it last. By midday, Marcus encountered another Courtney patrol, this one larger and more alert. They were looking for him now, spreading out in a search pattern. He couldn't fight 6 aliens with his injuries and limited weapons, so he used human cunning instead. He led them into a crystal maze where their numbers meant nothing, picked off the stragglers one by one, and melted away before they could coordinate a response. Each encounter cost him strength he couldn't spare, but it also bought time for Haven. Every alien he killed was 1 less in the final assault. Every patrol he disrupted was another delay in their timetable. He was bleeding to death in the desert, but he was also systematically destroying their entire operation. As the second night fell, Marcus could see lights on the horizon. New Haven was still 20 kilometers away, but he was close enough to smell hope. His body was failing rapidly now. The combat stimulants had pushed him beyond his limits and the crash was coming, but he was going to make it. He was going to warn them. The Courtney had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed that leaving him bleeding in the sand meant he was defeated. They didn't understand that humans were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. Marcus stumbled through the main gate of New Haven just as the morning shift was beginning. The colony guards barely recognized him as human. His uniform was shredded and stained with blood, both old and fresh. Improvised bandages covered most of his visible skin. His left leg dragged behind him, supported by a crude crutch made from alien technology and salvaged gear. His eyes were sunken and fever-bright, but they burned with purpose. Medical emergency! One guard shouted, running toward him. Get Dr. Walsh! But Marcus grabbed the guard's arm with surprising strength. No time, he gasped. Get Major Thompson. The Korthani are coming, less than 12 hours. Word spread quickly through the small colony. Within minutes, Major David Thompson arrived with his small staff of military advisors. Thompson was a career soldier who had seen action on a dozen worlds, but even he was shocked by Marcus's appearance. It was clear the man should be dead, yet here he was delivering critical intelligence. Captain Reed, Thompson said, recognizing him from previous briefings. What happened to your team? Dead, Marcus said simply. Ambush at the sensor array. It was bait. They knew we were coming. He pulled out a small data pad that had somehow survived his ordeal. I counted at least 40 Korthani, maybe more. Heavy weapons, orbital support. They're planning a full assault on New Haven. Thompson studied the tactical information Marcus had gathered during his desperate journey. Troop positions, weapon types, estimated numbers, approach routes. It was incredibly detailed intelligence that could only have come from direct observation. But the idea that one man could survive what Marcus described seemed impossible. You're telling me you walked 40 kilometers through hostile territory while badly wounded, and somehow gathered all this intelligence? Thompson asked. Marcus nodded weakly. They think I'm dead. Didn't expect resistance. I took out 3 patrols on the way here. Disrupted their communications, but there are too many of them. New Haven needs to prepare now, or everyone dies? Doctor. Walsh arrived and immediately began examining Marcus's wounds. She was horrified by what she found. This man needs immediate surgery, she told Thompson. Multiple plasma burns, internal bleeding, severe dehydration, and what looks like stimulant poisoning. He should be in a medical pod, not standing here. Talking, no, Marcus said firmly, no medical pod. They need my knowledge to set up the defense. You can patch me up afterward if there is an afterward. Thompson made the decision that would save the colony. He believed Marcus's report and immediately declared a state of emergency. Air raid sirens began wailing across New Haven, calling all residents to emergency stations. The colony's small military detachment, barely 20 soldiers, began preparing defensive positions, but New Haven was primarily a mining colony, not a military base. Most of the residents were civilian miners, farmers, and technicians. They had basic weapons for hunting and protection against wildlife, but nothing that could stop a Korthani assault force. Thompson's regular defenses were designed to handle raiders and pirates, not a full military invasion. Marcus worked with Thompson's staff to turn civilian resources into military assets. The mining explosives used to break up or deposits could be converted into improvised bombs. Industrial vehicles could be modified into mobile weapons platforms. The colony's deep mining tunnels could provide protected positions and supply routes. The Korthani have a weakness, Marcus explained to the gathered defenders. They're overconfident. They see humans as soft targets, easy prey. That arrogance can be used against them. He outlined Korthani tactics and psychology based on his 3 years of fighting them. They relied heavily on technological superiority and expected their enemies to break and run when faced with superior firepower. They had never encountered human stubbornness and adaptability on this scale. The colonists worked through the day with desperate efficiency. Miners who had never held weapons practiced with hunting rifles. Engineers rigged industrial equipment to create improvised defenses. Even children helped by carrying supplies and ammunition. The entire colony became a fortress. Marcus refused medical treatment beyond basic field dressing, instead moving from position to advise on defensive preparations. He showed them how to create killing fields using the colony's infrastructure, where to place charges for maximum effect, how to use the mining tunnels to move troops without being detected by orbital sensors. Remember, he told each group of defenders, you're not fighting for victory, you're fighting for survival. Make them pay for every meter, make them afraid. Show them that humans don't break. As evening approached, the defenders took their positions. Thompson had managed to contact other human forces in the sector, but help was still days away. They were on their own until reinforcements could arrive. The colony's few military-grade weapons were positioned at key choke points. Civilian volunteers with mining equipment and hunting rifles filled the gaps. Marcus took position at the main defensive line despite his injuries. He could barely hold his rifle steady, but his presence gave the other defenders courage. Word had spread about his impossible journey and the intelligence he had gathered. To the colonists, he had become a symbol of human determination. Dr. Walsh had finally gotten close enough to examine him properly during a brief break. "You're running on stimulants and pure willpower," she told him quietly. "Your body is shutting down. You need medical attention now, or you're going to die." Marcus looked out at the defensive positions where miners and farmers were preparing to fight professional alien soldiers. "I'm already dead," he said. "I die back in that desert. This is just my body refusing to admit it. All that matters now is making sure they hold the line." The first Corthony scouts appeared on the horizon just as the twin suns began to set. Through binoculars, Thompson could see them studying the colony's defenses, probably confused by what they were seeing. This wasn't supposed to be a defended position. Intelligence had told them New Haven was a soft civilian target. Marcus smiled grimly as he watched the alien scouts. "They're starting to realize something's wrong," he told Thompson. "Good, fear is our best weapon now." The night was filled with preparation sounds, weapons being checked, positions being reinforced, final messages being recorded for loved ones who might never see them again. But underneath it all was a growing sense of determination. The Corthony had underestimated humans before, and they were about to do it again. Dawn came with the thunder of orbital bombardment. The Corthony ships high above New Haven opened fire with precision energy weapons, targeting what their sensors identified as key defensive positions. The ground shook with each impact, and buildings disappeared in flashes of superheated plasma. But Marcus's intelligence had saved lives. The colonists had moved everything critical underground during the night, and many of the targets the aliens hit were decoys built from mining equipment and scrap metal. Major Thompson crouched in the command bunker, 20 meters beneath the colony's main administrative building. The ceiling shook with each orbital strike, raining dust and small debris on his staff. "How long will this last?" he asked Marcus, who was propped against the wall with fresh bandages covering his wounds. 10 minutes, maybe 15, Marcus replied, his voice weak but steady. "They'll soften us up, then send in ground forces. Standard Corthony doctrine. They expect the bombardment to break our will to fight." Above ground, the civilian defenders huddled in reinforced positions and mining tunnels. The bombardment was terrifying, but not as deadly as it could have been. The Corthony were targeting military positions that no longer existed, while the actual defensive lines remained hidden. When the energy barrage finally stopped, the colonists emerged to find their trap intact. The ground assault began with a formation of Corthony dropships descending from orbit. Each ship carried 20 alien warriors in full combat armor, armed with energy weapons and supported by hover tanks. As they landed in the open ground before New Haven, their commander probably felt confident about the coming battle. Orbital bombardment had cleared the way, and they were facing poorly armed civilians. The first surprise came when the lead hover tank hit a mining charge buried in the landing zone. The explosion threw the 30-ton vehicle into the air and sent shrapnel tearing through nearby infantry. Before the aliens could react, more charges detonated in sequence, turning their organized landing into chaos. "Now!" Thompson shouted into his communicator. The colonists opened fire from concealed positions. Hunting rifles cracked from rooftops and mining tunnels. Industrial laser cutters, designed to slice through solid rock, found new targets in alien armor. The Corthony had expected token resistance from frightened civilians. Instead, they faced coordinated fire from defenders who knew every inch of their home ground. Marcus watched the battle unfold from the command bunker's observation port, unable to join the fighting but still coordinating the defense. "They're trying to advance down the main street, he reported. Hit them with the mining charges under the water processing plant. The explosion collapsed half a city block, crushing a squad of Korthani infantry and blocking their advance route. The aliens began to realize they were fighting in a carefully prepared killing field, not capturing an undefended colony, but the Korthani adapted quickly. They spread out into smaller groups, using their superior technology to find new approaches. Their energy weapons could punch through the colonists' improvised defenses, and their armor was proof against most civilian weapons. Numbers began to tell as the morning wore on. The eastern perimeter started to buckle when a Korthani assault team found a weak point in the defenses. A group of miners with hunting rifles couldn't stop 4 professional alien soldiers empowered. Armor. The aliens broke through and began rolling up the defensive line, forcing the humans to fall back. "I have to go," Marcus told Thompson, struggling to his feet. "You can barely stand," the major protested. "You'll just get yourself killed." Marcus picked up his rifle, using it as a crutch. "Maybe, but if that line breaks, we all die anyway." He made his way through the tunnels to the eastern perimeter, moving by feel and memory through passages he had studied during the night. When he emerged behind the threatened position, he found chaos. The Korthani had broken through at 3 points, and the civilian defenders were falling back in disorder. "Hold the line," Marcus shouted, his voice carrying over the noise of battle. "Make them pay for every step." His appearance had an immediate effect on the defenders' morale. Here was the man who had walked through hell to warn them, the soldier who had refused to die in the desert. If he could keep fighting with his injuries, they could hold their positions. Marcus took up a firing position behind an overturned mining vehicle and began picking off Korthani infantry with careful shots. His hands shook from weakness and stimulant. Poisoning, but his aim was still true. Each shot found its target, exploiting the gaps in alien armor that he had learned during years of combat. The breakthrough stalled as the defenders rallied around their unlikely hero. Miners and farmers fought with desperate courage, turning every building into a fortress and every street into a killing ground. The Korthani found themselves fighting not just for territory, but for survival in an environment where every civilian was a potential enemy. As the afternoon wore on, the tide of battle began to turn. The aliens' superior technology couldn't overcome the colonists' intimate knowledge of their terrain and absolute determination to survive. Every Korthani advance was met with hidden explosives, crossfire from unexpected positions, and defenders who refused to break even when facing impossible odds. The Korthani commander, watching his organized assault turn into urban warfare, began to feel something he had never experienced before. These humans weren't running. They weren't surrendering. They seemed to get stronger as the battle continued, turning their own casualties into inspiration for greater resistance. By evening, the alien assault had stalled completely. What should have been a quick victory against helpless civilians had become a grinding battle of attrition. The Korthani were taking casualties they couldn't afford, fighting an enemy that wouldn't admit defeat. Marcus collapsed at his firing position as the sun set. Finally unable to continue, his body had given. Everything it had, sustained only by determination and combat drugs. But around him, the defense held firm. The colonists had learned that they could fight professional soldiers and win, not through superior technology, but through superior will. Dr. Walsh found him there as the fighting died down for the night. "You did it," she said, checking his pulse. The line held. "Not over yet," Marcus whispered. "They'll try again tomorrow, but now they know. They know humans don't break." Above them, the Korthani forces regrouped in confusion and growing fear. They had never faced an enemy like this before, one that turned wounds into weapons and suffering into strength. The confident warriors who had landed that morning were beginning to understand that they might have bitten off more than they could chew. By dawn of the second day, the Korthani assault had collapsed into scattered fighting groups. What began as an organized military operation had become a nightmare of survival. The aliens found themselves trapped in a hostile environment where every building could hide snipers, every street could conceal explosives, and every civilian they faced fought with the desperation of someone protecting their home, Major Thompson stood in the ruins of what had been the colony's main square, surveying the battlefield. Courtney bodies lay scattered among the debris, their advanced armor and weapons useless against an enemy that refused to fight fair. Human casualties were lighter than anyone had dared hope, mostly because Marcus's intelligence had allowed them to prepare properly. "Status report," Thompson called to his squad leaders over the radio. "Eastern sector secure," came the reply. "Found 12 dead aliens and captured 3 wounded. Western perimeter holding. The mining tunnel network is working perfectly. They can't coordinate attacks when they can't see us coming. Southern approach is clear. The hover tanks are destroyed and their infantry is scattered. But the most important news came from the northern sector. We've got the Courtney commander and his personal guard trapped in the old processing plant. Maybe 6 or 7 aliens? Total. They're cut off from their ships and running low on ammunition." Thompson smiled grimly. The tables had turned completely. The hunters had become the hunted. He made his way to the processing plant, following tunnels that kept him out of sight of any remaining alien snipers. Behind him came a squad of colonists armed with captured Courtney weapons. They found Marcus at the plant entrance, somehow still upright despite his injuries. He was leaning against a mining vehicle, using it for support, but his eyes were alert and focused. In his hands was a Courtney energy rifle that he could barely lift. "Captain?" Thompson said with concern. "You should be in medical." "After this is finished," Marcus replied. "I want to be here for the end." They could hear voices from inside the plant, clicking and chittering in the Courtney language. The sounds were different from the confident communications they had intercepted. Earlier, these were the sounds of fear and desperation. Thompson called out in Standard, "Courtney forces, you are surrounded. Your ships are damaged and retreating. Your ground forces are defeated. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the laws of war." A familiar voice answered from inside the plant. It was the same commander who had mocked Marcus in the desert, kicked sand over his wounds, and called humans weak prey. But now the alien's voice shook with something he had never felt before: terror. "We wish to negotiate," the Courtney commander called out. "We have valuable intelligence. We can call off other attacks. We offer trade agreements, technology transfers, anything you require." Marcus stepped forward, his movement catching the alien commander's attention through a broken window. The Courtney warrior saw him and made a sound like breaking glass. The creature that had left him bleeding in the sand now faced the impossible. Reality that his victim had not only survived, but led the defense that destroyed his entire force. "You said humans were soft meat," Marcus called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "You said we were weak prey. You said we should have stayed in our own space." The Courtney commander's reply came in broken Standard, words tumbling over each other in his panic. "Mistake, grave mistake, did not understand. Your species is strong, very strong, we acknowledge this. We will tell our empire. No more attacks on human colonies. We swear by the breeding queens." Other Courtney voices joined in, a chorus of aliens who had spent their careers conquering weaker species and had never encountered anything like human determination. They offered everything they could think of: military intelligence, trade routes, technology, even their own lives in exchange for mercy. Thompson looked at Marcus. The decision would ultimately be his to make. These aliens had come to slaughter innocent civilians. By their own laws and customs, they deserved no mercy. Any other species would have executed them immediately, but Marcus was thinking about more than revenge. He was thinking about the message this moment would send throughout the galaxy. Every species would hear about what happened at New Haven. They would learn that humans could be pushed, hurt, even killed, but they would not be conquered. "You're free to go," Marcus said finally. "Take your wounded and leave. But understand this clearly: humanity is not prey. We are not easy targets. We do not break, we do not surrender, and we do not forgive those who threaten our families." The Courtney commander emerged slowly from the plant, his ornate armor cracked and scorched. Behind him came the remnants of his personal guard, proud. warriors reduced to beaten survivors. They moved carefully, expecting treachery, unable to believe that the humans would honor their word. "Why?" the commander asked as he passed Marcus. "Your customs would allow execution. Why show mercy?" Marcus looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. "Because the next time your people think about attacking humans, I want them to remember this moment. I want them to know that we could have killed you all, but chose not to. And I want them to understand that our mercy has limits." The surviving aliens made their way to their damaged ships under human escort. As they boarded their vessels, the commander turned back one more time. His compound eyes focused on Marcus, the human who should have died in the desert but had instead orchestrated his defeat. "The Empire will hear of this," he said. "They will know about human ... audience." "Good," Marcus replied. "Make sure they understand the message. Leave us in peace and we'll leave you in peace. But if you come for our colonies again, if you threaten our people again, we won't be so generous next time." The Corthony ships limped away from New Haven, carrying word of humanity's first major victory against the Empire. The aliens who had expected an easy conquest had learned a hard lesson about underestimating their enemies. As the ships disappeared into the sky, Marcus finally allowed himself to collapse. Dr. Walsh was there immediately, along with a medical team that had been standing by. But even as they worked to save his life, he was smiling. "Did we win?" he asked weakly. "We won," Thompson confirmed. "The colony is safe. Reinforcements are on the way, and the galaxy just learned not to mess with humans." Marcus closed his eyes, finally allowing his body to rest. He had walked through hell, refused to die, and turned certain defeat into victory. More importantly, he had sent a message that would echo through the stars. Humanity was not prey. They were predators who chose to show mercy, and that made them more dangerous than any mere conqueror. The story of New Haven would spread throughout both human and alien space. It would inspire other colonies to stand and fight when threatened. It would make alien empires think twice before attacking seemingly helpless human settlements. And it would establish the reputation that would define humanity's place in the galaxy, a species that could be wounded but never broken, that could be hurt but never conquered, and that turned their greatest defeats into their most decisive victories.